Hey guys, Thomas the Jr. here, aka Mustached, here to review the movie Scream, or I guess as some people are calling it, Scream 5, I guess. But with that, if you end up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord, second will head you over to my Patreon, third will head you over to my PayPal. Any donations are greatly appreciated, and showing will be recalled at the end of the review. With that out of the way, let's talk about Scream. Or Scream 5, I guess. But Scream is the next in line of the Scream movies. And yes, Scream has been a phenomena for a while. He's one of the vintage classic killers, like Freddy, like Jason. So he has quite an overpowering stay in the horror genre. Hell, his whole shtick is sort of this meta. It has become this sort of meta within meta horror. I think that was even the case in the original movie, if I remember correctly. It has been a really long time, or I don't know if they picked that up after the first movie, but I want to say it's still in the first movie, question mark. It has been a long time. Point being that this is, of course, the next generation of the Scream movies, and surprise, surprise, this movie is super meta. And I mean that in the literal sense, in that it directly, since there is a movie within the movie about the movie, that is a thing that we're now at the point at, they get to call out about the movie within the movie. But, confusing things aside, we'll get into all that as the movie progresses in the plot. But I do want to say that I do find this sort of premise quite fascinating, as Scream did provide a lot to the movie, landscape. I mean, think of it. Scary Movie is a whole thing that started because of Scream, primarily. And that was the whole, let's super comedy it, joke about the whole Scream aspect, which had a more comical, meta, about a movie about meta. So, yes, it has gone a long way of movies about meta, and again, we're going to talk about meta a lot in this movie review because it is tied to the plot of the movie, so get ready for that. Anyway, the movie begins, and we begin, of course, with the vintage phone call, and the woman picks up her phone, and she's, texting her friend to find out, what's going on. So we are introduced to our first victim, named Charlie, I believe her name is, and of course, she is insisted upon by Scream to answer these questions, and if she gets one wrong, Scream will go after her friend, and if she calls the police, he will go after the friend. And he goes and asks questions about the movie Stab, which, of course, is the movie about the original movie Scream, the first one. So that's what I mean about the context of there is a movie within the movie universe, is the Stab movies, which is, of course, inspired by the events of Scream, which has its own meta at this point. So, whew. Anyways, eventually, through asserted locking and unlocking the door, which I'm not sure how you do that to someone else's abilities of household keeping, but point being, there are some questionable things in this movie, but overall, I would say this movie does a lot good while also commentating on the bad, while also doing the bad. So there's a lot here to get to. So we cut to a woman named Tara. She is the one who is doing all of these things, getting attacked, and through it, she gets the questions, she gets the last one wrong, and she's the one who gets attacked as she begins to freak out and gets the last questions based off of the movie Stab wrong. So she opens the door and Scream attacks. So she is stabbed. And after she is attacked, it is almost presumed that she is killed, but she is not. And we'll get to that. We cut to two workers kissing. They are boyfriend and girlfriend. We cut to Sam and her boyfriend. I believe her boyfriend is. I call him the boyfriend throughout most of the movie, but we'll get to that too. So he tags along with her as she mentions that the ghost face as the Scream. That's what they call Scream in the context of the movie as well. It's his alt name, I guess, if you want to call it that. But she learns that her sister is alive. So we cut to a school where we meet our potential other victim / crew of characters. And they already know that someone has been attacked because they've been updated via texting and all that good stuff. So we have Mindy, our meta character, who relives one of the original moments later on in the movie. We have our outsider bully named Vince. We have, as we cut away back to the sister, or Sam and her boyfriend, they literally compare the movie Stab, aka Scream, to the movie Halloween. So again, more meta context within this movie. So again, get ready for a lot of that here. We also have a character named Chad, a character named Wes, a character named Amber, and I wish I could tell you more about their personalities, but I will say one of the movie's issues is that the rest of the cast, outside of the main character, they're not that well defined, I want to say. Which I always say is one of the big no-nos in horror. So, anyway, Amber is Bracelet Girl. I literally named them after archetypes because that's what they kind of end up being. But then again, with this movie being as meta as it is, I don't know if that's supposed to be a bad thing anymore, or if that's a part of the comedy aspect of these movies. Because there's definitely quite a few moments where I heard people laughing. But anyway, so Vince, the bully character, interjects into their little conversation and he kind of gets shooed away. And Scream goes after him first. Excuse me. So we cut to Sam and Tara, the one that was attacked. So Sam sees something going on, and as she kind of heads off on her own and sees the Scream goes after her in the hospital room, and she quickly bumps into a cop, and when the cop obviously gets there, the killer is gone. But then, when she comes back, she's set aside by Cop Hicks, who tells her that, like, oh, she doesn't belong, she's sort of the outcast of this little town, blah, blah, blah. And Sam goes over her story about how her father was one of the original killers. Oh, one of the two. And Tara gets upset at her. She kind of fumbles her words here, but her upsetness kind of, I guess, weighs in on that. Anyway, she tells Richie, the boyfriend character, to get the hell out of there, but he decides to stick around. We cut to Dewy, as they say they need to they need to get some professional help. And he's watching Gail, the original reporter from the first movie. And he goes over the rules as indicated by the meta in the very first movie. About, who do you trust, things of that nature. Point being is that to stick to these rules. And so, he does eventually close them out, but he does call Sidney Prescott, the original OG Scream survivor. And he also makes sure to text Gail Witherstorm about what's going on. So everyone is brought into a singular room. And the Amber goes on probably what I'm going to call is the most meta conversation I have ever heard in any movie. I mean, she goes on. This is like a 5 to 6, 7 minute scene of her talking about, like, how, movie sequels are, get worse and worse, and how remakes are often bad. And, like, these soft reboots / the movie within the movie that she's talking about right now, which is Scream 5, is like this sort of fan fiction story that they are telling now. Spoiler alert, Amber's one of the killers, by the way. So, after that whole kerfuffle of, mocking, sort of self-mocking and mocking the entire industry of, Hollywood, because they mention Hollywood, and saying, like, oh, what the fans deserve. And we'll get to that at the end, so, yes. Anyway, so Sam splits off after, gets, like, accused of being the killer as well. As, who's one of the real killers is still under suspicion. Meanwhile, we cut to Wes, the big, athletic white guy, I guess, who seems innocent enough, and his mom is the sheriff. So as he's taking a shower, and as he's, his mom is, like, trying to get somewhere else, she's called by the killer and is warned that her son will be killed via, like, the movie Psycho. Again, meta reference to a vintage horror movie. So she freaks out and heads back. However, she is the one who is attacked first and killed. So, as Wes is preparing for dinner, I guess, we get perhaps again a more comical thing of they overplay the music of they have him open a door and cover behind him So you see him on the forefront, and the background is now the thing that is covering him. And the vintage thing to do is when he closes it, the killer would be there. They do this twice to this very character as he is going through this little setup. So I heard some laughter as they overplay that little moment. And it's very obvious. They do it very obviously to make it sure it's like, hey, this is a thing that happens in killer movies a lot. But he notices the door is slightly opened, so he goes to close it, only to have Scream be inside and attack him from behind anyway, and kill him fairly quickly. So Sam gets to the scene of the crime as it has already occurred, and Gail also arrives on the scene and spots Dewy, and she's like kind of sort of mad at him a little bit, but he talks about how he's retired now. Meanwhile, Richie, who is the other killer, by the way, spoiler alert, he's watching YouTube videos, and he goes over Stab 8 and how it's gone off of the rails. So again, you know, how, again, mocking sequels, the very thing this is, you know, like, hey, we're in on it, right, type of writing to the extreme degree. Like, this movie is not trying to hide what it is a meta horror commentary movie at this point, and it knows that it is through its writing. So, we cut to Tara, who is at the hospital, and the hospital lights go out. And this is definitely a scene that I question of how the killer was able to get into a hospital and it's empty, or nearly empty. I don't buy that one at all. That one is a little bit of a... no. There's like one security guard and he's dead. One. That is ridiculous. I don't think a hospital would ever be set up in that way, so they did create an impossible scenario. And yeah, that one scene, I definitely feel like they could have reworked that to make some sort of sense, but you know, every movie has its flaws, so I did have to point that one out, and I don't think meta can save it, though. That's the thing. Not even meta could save that one. It's just broken. It's a broken scene. Unfortunate. And an otherwise really solid movie as we proceed. Well, solid in the killing regard. I do want to emphasize that. So, Richie heads over, and Scream attacks. And so, Dewy stays behind as he gets all of them out of there. You know, her and Sam, who also arrives at the hospital to get to her, and they manage to save both. But Dewy stays behind and is attacked. So he is the consequence. He is the one who stays behind, does the brave, heroic sacrifice, and is killed in the process. So it is unfortunate that one of the, you know, iconic characters does get killed off, but I do feel like they did it serviceable enough in a respectable way. He did it to save other people's lives, and in the general sense of, you know, his role as a cop, you know, to protect and serve. That is, again, the quintessential things that you would expect for a police officer to do, or a good one at the very most. So, I gotta say, killing off vintage characters is a huge risk. It is. There's no question about it. I constantly rail about how poorly The Last of Us 2 handles its iconic character of Joel. And the way they have him go out, nothing. That scene is, I can't tell you how many times I have to go over it, fundamentally broken. The entire thing. Every main character is fundamentally broken in that scene. Here, the scene is technically fundamentally broken about, how no one's in the hospital. Sure. However, the character is still in character. That is very important. He's still a cop at the end of the day. Yes, he is retired, but he still has that core part of him that makes him that character. He isn't changed to make himself stupider like Joel was, and every other character was insanely stupid, or the character you're controlling heading into that doorway when you had a perfect shot on the person who's attacking Joel, and she steps through the doorway. Again, stupidity at its finest, broken at its finest. Here, while again the hospital being empty is still technically broken, that aspect is true. The character still is to his core character. So I give it a little bit more credit while some of it is still broken. That much is true. But I find it way more commendable that they stuck to the character's core trait about being heroic, about doing what your job entails you to do to the best of your ability. And, he says it best. He knows that the Scream, character or killer comes back. Again, more meta, but still, that is why he stayed behind, to also save them, but to also make sure that that killer was dead, but he did suffer the consequences of that. Anyway, so we see the consequences of Gail, as well as she learns of this fate, as Sydney also arrives on the scene. So, Tara, as Sam makes her way back to her, discusses why she was truly mad and is the reason that she left in the first place for so long. Excuse me. So, Sydney goes to them and tells them what to do, or, tries to tell them, you can't run away from this. It's gonna catch up with you. It's gonna keep haunting you. And she knows, and she says she knows better than most. Again, the OG main character is saying this, so, paying credence to that is very key. So she tracks their car. But we cut to our party, where we see the rest of our characters. And of course we cut to a party, because what was in the original movie? A party. And what are they watching? The original Stab movie, or the original Scream movie, because of course they are. So, this is where our characters learn the lessons, the rest of them. Chad heads out on his own, looking for his girlfriend, for some reason. I forget why, but he gets this pop-up ad thing that's tracking her. That, I don't know, that part doesn't really make that whole lot of sense, but whatever. Point being is that he's, placed further away from everyone else, and he's proceeded to be attacked and killed. So after that, we cut back to the others arriving at the party, and they say, hey, we're killing this party to make sure the rest of you people will stay alive and live and all that good stuff, so, you know. So Richie leaves temporarily as Mindy continues to watch the movie Stab. And talk about meta, she's watching the very scene where the character in the movie Stab is watching a movie about being attacked. So meta on meta on meta of being attacked by a other person watching it saying watch out. And of course, she is now being the one being attacked and saying watch out. So talk about, you know, loops on loops of meta-ness in this movie. Just whoof, off the rails. But she gets to live, surprisingly, but she does get attacked and injured a little bit here in this part. Sam comes to her rescue, and Richie comes back, and Chad's ex-girlfriend, I guess, comes in at this point. I guess she's an ex now. I don't know. Again, the character establishment is one of this movie's weaker points, but, you know. Anyway. So, after kerfuffling in the main hall where everyone is, everyone's sort of yelling at each other, and Amber, revealing her true nature, not in disguise anymore, pulls out a gun and shoots the ex-girlfriend right in the head. Point blank. So everyone else is freaking out. Sam is pulled aside with Richie, her boyfriend, and Gail and Sid make their way toward the house. And they see an escape or outside Amber when they arrive, and they don't fall for that trap either. So Sam eventually finds up her tied-up sister, Tara, and we don't see her get fully escorted out, but she does, off-screen. So, Sydney, now there, is attacked by a Scream, while Richie is promptly hidden away. But as he makes his way down right next to Sam, this is when he reveals himself as the second along in the killers, him and Amber. And this is where they go off on their tirade and saying, literally, fuck Hollywood. And boy, is that a sentiment I can totally get behind. Fuck Hollywood. The guy who won Game of the Award also said fuck Hollywood. So yeah, fuck Hollywood. I fully embrace that sentiment. Fuck it. And they go on their tirade about, like, they want the Scream name to live on. That is their literal shtick, is that they want the killer of this, you know, franchise to remain relevant, to have it live up to the fans' expectations. They want to do it for the people. But they want to go about it by being the killers, though. They are attacked, and Richie says that the fans will win. Which at the end of this I can say, yeah, okay. And anyway, Tara and attacks Amber, while the other Sam also attacks Richie, and Gail and Sid help out with Amber. They eventually shoot her, and they burn her through a fire. Sam continues her attack on Richie, and she says that there's a new rule, and that's that you don't fuck with someone who's related to an ex-killer or a previous killer, and proceeds to stab Richie over and over again. She proceeds to kill Richie first, and then they are jump scared by a burnt amber running at them, but she is stopped dead in her tracks by a shot to the head by an injured Terrell with a gun, and shooting her down for good. So, Sam thanks Gail and Sid for their efforts in coming in and apologizes for the loss of Dewy, and makes her way back to her sister as both ambulances take them away, and that is the end of the Scream 5/Scream movie. And yes, again, outside of the lack of character work, outside of the main character and the reprising roles, I will say, again, outside of the hospital scene as well, pretty solid slasher movie. It sticks to its slash meta movie. That is undeniable. It is a meta slasher movie. That is unescapable. To say that this movie isn't meta is absolutely ridiculous. Of course it's a meta movie at this point. Of course it makes the references. And it's part of its brilliance is that it knows where it came from. And it keeps its its legacy characters not only involved, aged up and ready, but it keeps them to their core characters, or makes them, it puts them in dire situations, but they're still true to the characters that they have become. They don't change in worse ways. And that alone deserves a lot of respect. Their writing is very solid. And, the main characters, Sam and her sister, pretty well written, outside of the other killed off characters. And you know what? The two killers, I would say that their writing, while hitting the direct meta-ness of this movie, which is to its credit, are kind of not only a reflection, but when you notice the reflection, you notice how good their writing actually is, when you notice it more and more. And yeah, so outside of that, I would say main characters got their due. Legacy characters definitely got their due. Killed off side characters are definitely the weak link, which is unfortunate, but I would say that is still a surprisingly good outcome, all things considered. As much time has passed, as many movies have come along, / video games that have come along, and had a sequel or a remake absolutely destroy their previous characters with no regard, no passing of the torch, none of it, just spitting on its previous predecessors, what came before. The absolute disrespect we have seen time and time and time again, to the point of ridiculous. They point out the movies, or at least the killer does, during her monologue. Star Wars, she mentions Ghostbusters, which had a really good Afterlife movie that I would also recommend because it did the same thing. It said, hey, we recognize that the characters who came before, they deserve their respect. They deserve to be written as the way that they were when we last saw them, and integrate them into the plot in a way that makes sense here as well. So Scream follows up that attitude of keeping the characters to the way that you would have expected them to follow in their journey. Gail, her being a professional reporter because she was a upstart reporter in the first one. Sydney being the professional of, like, she knows the rules, she knows, like, how to check things, but she's still put under distress. Dewy as a cop who puts his life before others, who risks, his own life to help serve and protect, to be that cop, archetype to its, to its fault. Staying true to the core characters, and then passing the torch and saying, hey, yes, Sam is actually directly related to the previous killer, or, way back when, but point being that this is the new, while we're respecting the new characters, we're giving the new main character enough of a character, through line that we can strongly follow, and making sure that our killer/killers are also really strongly defined, which is equally as important in this type of movie, because the killers are always revealed in these slasher movies / scream movies. They are always revealed, and there's always someone within the group, as noted within this movie as well, and so on and so forth. So as a meta movie, it succeeds. Primarily as a movie that nods to its original, it succeeds. As a movie that follows a good main character, it succeeds. Yes, it does have a poor scene in the hospital, undeniable. And it does have side characters that could have been a little bit better fleshed out as for the other characters. Yes, that is also technically true. So as a score, I'm going to give this movie, which out of all the remakes and all the reboots is probably still incredibly high, outside of Ghostbusters Afterlife, a 6 out of 10. That is still impressive, mind you, for a remake or a continuation that has been this long. I think I gave Afterlife an 8 or a 7, if I recall correctly, because that movie is really good. It knows and respects its characters and knows how to pass the torch. It knew how to do that successfully. It knew how to write that material. And that's what's so important, is understanding that material and respecting it to the degree that it does. Here as well. That is no small feat. That is to be commended. That is to be respected, because it is so fucking rare. It is so fucking rare to see characters be respected for what they have done before. Sydney is a legacy character. Do not get it twisted. She is so incredibly good in this movie, and was in the original Scream movie, so she deserved the ending that she got here. Yes, Dewy did die in the process, but he stayed in character. That is very still commendable, and that sacrifice meant something. It passed the torch as well. So it stayed in character, which is more important than anything else. If you're talking about, previously established characters. So this movie does a lot right, but it does have its few flaws that do bump it down from a solid 7 or even possibly 8 out of 10. So it's still a good movie. I would actually still recommend it. It's definitely worth watching, whether, you're looking for a general slasher movie, or if you want to, get in on the meta of meta movies. This is definitely hits that up to an ace. So that's my full review of Scream/Scream 5. If you ended up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord, second to my Patreon, third to my PayPal. Any donations are greatly appreciated. Helps me continue making content on this channel. Helps support me in general, so on and so forth. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.